Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. Kenya is continuing 3 days of official mourning for the civilian and military victims of the siege at the Westgate shopping centre in Nairobi. Flags are flying at half-mast amid visibly tighter security around the Kenyan capital, after at least 67 people are known to have died after suspected al-Shabaab militants stormed the shopping centre. The death toll is expected to rise and many questions remain. Meanwhile, an international arrest warrant has been issued for the British terror suspect Samantha Lewthwaite, who was married to one of the July 7 London bombers. The warrant relates to charges of being in possession of explosives and conspiracy to commit a felony dating back to 2011. But she has been linked to the attack over the weekend, although this has not yet been confirmed. Her associate and fellow Briton, Jermaine Grant, is due to go on trial on Tuesday in Kenya for terrorism offences. The presence of jihadists from Western countries has revealed itself also in neighbouring Somalia on a large scale, where one Omar Hamami, who is a 29-year-old native of Alabama, was one of the leaders of the local jihadist movement of al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is a Somalia-based militant group that is affiliated with al-Qaeda. It said it carried out the attack in the mall in retaliation for Kenyan army operations in Somalia. But what's also raised concerns is the potential role of foreigners in the siege, Westerners who have converted to an Islamist ideology. What are we to make of that? Is this the new front on terror? Well, to discuss this and the issues surrounding it, I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Mary Harper. She is the author of the book Getting Somalia Wrong: Faith, War and Hope in a Shattered State. Also here in the studio is Mohamed Elmi. He's the chairman of Somali Diaspora UK. And on the line we have Valentina Soria, who is a security analyst at IHS Janes Consulting. A warm welcome to you all. First of all, Mohamed, are you anticipating some kind of impact on the Somali community in the UK in the wake of these attacks?
The Somali community large who live here, I think it's estimated like 400,000, and I think probably we receive 100 emails and phone calls, and mainly those who participating was mainly youth, and really they concerning about what was the impact. So I think the community, there was every Somali community where they socialize, cafe or restaurant. I think mainly the topic, the discussion is mainly about what happened to Kenya and what's the impact to the community, the friend and family and relative who live here. What is going to be, is going to be any link? We know that there's still, who hasn't identified, but I think they're concerning about the possibility that one of their relative may be involved, and what's the backlash coming there. They pretty much worry about that.
Do you anticipate a backlash in the UK?
When it comes to, really in the UK authority, I think really yesterday we have met some senior tourism command, his senior staff, police in MI5 Scotland Yard. And I think what we discuss in the level of degree that what the community thinks, and I organized and bring them, the community leaders together with the commander tourism itself. And what we discussed further was how there was a bit worry about, I think, what they shown the government in UK, mainly the community Somalia has been spotlighted nowadays. And we found that some of senior Americans, Senate, they've been mentioned yesterday during discussions that they have mentioned that the Somali community living mainly in Minnesota, who become nowadays in New Mogadishu, should be spotlighted and checked. But I think this is something that the community, whether the UK government will follow up, what I think America do, there's something that be worried. But I think the community before, they used to worry about stop and search, especially when they're going out from the airport, mainly youth who are traveling alone. But I think when this incident comes, the whole issue has taken to themselves. They worry deeply was going to be, as soon as the operation's finished.
Mary, David Kilcullen, who was a former advisor to David Petraeus, he made the point actually that he expects al-Shabaab to emerge stronger after this attack. I'm wondering, you've written a book about Somalia, Getting Somalia Wrong. What do you make of that? This is certainly a very strong statement that they've made.
Yes, al-Shabaab, following the attack in Kenya, has become a global brand. They basically won the media campaign by conducting this horrific attack and by being very effective in their use of social media in particular. So I think in terms of perhaps attracting new recruits globally, this might have actually served them quite well. I would put quite a big health warning on the reports of there being foreign, perhaps British or perhaps American Somalis or others involved in this attack, because that is pure speculation at the moment. And I think we have to wait and see what the evidence is about who these attackers were before any Somalis or anybody else can be blamed, particularly those in the UK and in America.
Valentina Soria from IHS Janes Consulting. Al-Shabaab did suffer heavy losses in Somalia a couple of years ago, where it's fighting African Union forces. Do you think that what it was trying to do, it was trying to remain relevant, and this is a warning to the world?
You're absolutely right. I mean, the group has suffered quite important strategic defeat in recent years, and I think that as a result of that, there has been a sense of complacency in some circles as to how effective that military offensive has been. So, of course, they've been pushed, out of main cities, of course, Mogadishu and Kismayo in particular, and so on. One thing is the ability to push them out, and another thing is actually the ability to degrade their capabilities and, in terms of manpower, ability to continue to conduct attacks. And actually, what they've done, they've continued to do so. And actually, they've grown bolder and bolder in the last maybe 6-7 months. We've seen not just the Kenya attack, but also, continuing attacks in Mogadishu. So actually really showing, that the group still has that capability to remain an effective fighting force on the ground, continuing to pose a significant threat to both the Somali government and stability in the wider region.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Brendan Cole. We're discussing the aftermath of the attack on a mall in Nairobi with Mary Harper, Mohamed Elmi and Valentina Soria. I suppose, Mohamed Elmi, given that there's 250,000 Somalis in the Kenyan capital in Nairobi, there is the chance that the Kenyan forces will overreact, and this is exactly playing into al-Shabaab's hands.
I think probably what you said is quite right, and I think probably now the ball is Kenyan side. And I think now the Somali community, who have large community living there out the last 2 decades, and some of them have a very serious business, and they contribute in Kenyan economic itself. And I think the place called is Lee Town, which I think mainly where the Somali dominant live, and their own MB has been always elected out there. I think the community out there, they've shown their solidarity to the brothers and sisters, to Kenyans. They have contributed in supplying medical, water, and anything that, the police and authority Kenyans that are required from. And I think the Somalian ambassador leading to the legislative community also donate and offer Kenyan government, especially NHS department. It has been taken blood to support those who are wounded. And this shows that the level of sympathy that exercising the Somali community, how they are absolutely find out this awful tragedy happened to their brothers and sisters. We know that now Israel and American and Britain are heavily on the ground nowadays. UK, they have been deployed, as far as we're concerned, that 3 days ago has been deployed some security analysts. So what we're thinking that is that the Kenyan government, if they react stupidly, if they become a negative to the community out there, they taking their money and they rape, torture. This is where something that we're trying to exercise and not to eliminate those community who have huge sympathy. So if they do that, what will become is that will give the message that Al-Shabaab, or maybe whoever behind this attack, will give huge membership automatically. And those youth, they will join straight away to Al-Shabaab. And I think we're worried that Nairobi, it might become a new Mogadishu. It depends on how Kenyan government, they play their role.
Mary Harper, the statement made by Ahmed Abdi Godani, who's also known as Mukhtar Abu Zubayr, he made it yesterday, posting online saying that Kenya should prepare for a war of attrition inside your own country, withdraw all your forces. So in terms of what we have here are twin motives, I suppose, but this sounds very territorial because, of course, there is a considerable Kenyan presence in Somalia. Do you see this as more of a territorial fight?
Kenya took the war to Al-Shabaab nearly exactly 2 years ago when it invaded southern Somalia, with the aim of creating basically a buffer zone between it and the south of Somalia, which was occupied by Al-Shabaab and still does have significant Al-Shabaab areas areas under Al-Shabaab's control. And in a way, Al-Shabaab, its action in Kenya was to take the war back right into the heart of the Kenyan power structure, to this glitzy mall in an upmarket district of Nairobi, which not only killed many Kenyans, but also many foreigners. So it was a kind of maximum global impact action on their part. The Kenyans have so far been more measured in their response to how they usually are. Usually, whenever there's any grenade attack or anything in Kenya, it's instantly blamed on Al-Shabaab, and the Kenyan authorities go and do these huge security sweeps in places like Mohamed mentioned in the mainly Somali district of Nairobi called East Lee. So I think Kenya's realised that that is not the best way to deal with Al-Shabaab, because it just radicalizes people. But it does have a huge problem, because Al-Shabaab, since its lost territory in Somalia, has become increasingly regional in its ambitions. And for instance, it had a Kiswahili radio station. Kiswahili is the language spoken widely in East Africa, not in Somalia at all. It had a Kiswahili website where it taught people how to make bombs, how to conduct suicide attacks and other things. So Kenya does have a real problem right there on its doorstep, and it can't just ignore the Somali problem, but I think it's learned it can't conduct these huge indiscriminate sweeps at the same time.
And on the regional points, Valentina Soria, it wasn't just Kenya that sent troops to fight al-Shabaab. Uganda did as well as part of an African Union force, so did Ethiopia. In terms of a regional struggle, do you anticipate these being the scenes of future terror attacks?
Al-Shabaab has already targeted Uganda. We should remember that they carried out an attack in 2010.
Of course, during the World Cup final, yes, of course.
Exactly. So they really targeted Kampala at the time. And again, that was claiming responsibility for that attack. They said that it was in response to, of course, Uganda intervention in the AMISOM mission in Somalia. So there is, of course, a regional implication in terms of how the extent, as I said, of al-Shabaab capabilities. I think that to some extent they've got an upper hand in Kenya as a consequence of, I don't know, the presence, of course, the significant Somali diaspora there, but also because they've actually focused even their recruitment campaign on trying to get some Kenyans on board, so that there's been a sort of recruitment strategy which is, as I said, has been targeting Kenyans. In terms of the actual reach of the group, at the moment it's more significant in Kenya, but of course we can't rule out the possibility that they could try and carry out similar attacks elsewhere.
The way that al-Shabaab have operated, can we compare it to something like the way the Taliban operate? They both operate in self-contained tactical cells. They don't seem to need a strong central command. I mean, they're also guided by Sharia law, I suppose you could argue. I mean, do you see a comparison there? Is that a fair one?
There are similarities in the way they, mainly in the vision that they've got for their country. So, the idea of establishing that kind of, Islamic state governed by Sharia law. So in terms of the actual governance, part of their strategy, there's definitely, similarity driven by the sort of, shared ideology in that sense. In terms of the actual command and control structure, there are, of course, differences in the way the group operates in Somalia, and the Taliban. There are differences. The Taliban used to be in control of of the country for up until the 9/11 attack. Al-Shabaab was in control of the territory but was pushed out. So I think that in general we should also remember that internally the internal cohesion of al-Shabaab has actually been dented in recent years. So especially actually since they decided to align themselves with al-Qaeda, a lot of internal discontent within the organization. And I think that might have had some kind of impact. We've seen that now that there is a sort of reorganization going on within al-Shabaab, with somehow the more extremist elements taking over and really having the upper hand. So I think that as a result of that, we might expect a sort of more harsh campaign strategy by the group.
Mohamed Elmi, but I'm wondering how much of ideology is behind this and how much they affiliate themselves with this idea of a Islamic caliphate which drives al-Qaeda's actions.
Let's just go back a little bit background of al-Shabaab and what's their ideology is. The reason, as all we are aware, that al-Shabaab recently, they lost the battle on the ground itself in Somalia. But I think for them to do such an attack, what I think a lot of people really have, Somali intellectuals who mainly live in the UK, they share Twitter and Facebook. I mean, these things, and Al-Shabaab, maybe they may claim they are behind on it and jump on the boat automatically when the things happen. We knew that when always Mogadishu happened, kind of this, they always claim whether it exists or not. This, I think a lot of people now, they believe in that this is something bigger picture than Al-Shabaab. But I think they're saying that Al-Shabaab cannot carry out such, a huge, we're aware that. I think that even before even the incident happened, the shopping mall itself, it's been hired a shop itself for a couple good months, 3-4 months, and they loaded their logistics, all these, tactics, and people who mastered behind it. The attack, it doesn't happen overnight. Is attack has planned good 3 months, 4 months, and that shows that now the tension we're getting and the information we're getting inside how it happened and how the attacks happen, that is something bigger picture than Al-Shabaab. But if I come to Al-Shabaab, how they gain on the ground, well, we find out that they're losing. I think Al-Shabaab is an organization that they seek an ideology, which I think those Somali youth who live in Somalia, they believe in that, the ideology that's saying that there's no tribalism, there's no nationalism, and there's no sexualism. They don't believe what we call gay or lesbians. So that's part of that. Anybody doesn't involve that, they're welcome. What they did, Al-Shabaab, they wrap all these three together. The Somali is a people who lost the last 20 decades is tribalism issue. So Al-Shabaab, they come a brand, an idea saying that anybody who think about tribe, we're not rolling. That's got nothing to do with us. So because of wrap all this together, that's how Al-Shabaab, they heavily get memberships from on the ground for financials, offering them money for £300, £400 a day. But I think when it comes to those youth who live in and abroad, mainly Minnesota and London, and I think the reason they join is they believe their ideology exists, and something that against on Western society living within the Muslim community, because I think they believe that Western society has been allowed gay and lesbians, but I think Al-Shabaab doesn't exist. So Somali community, they have fight each other for tribalism issue. We don't know even when we born, those who born in Western society, they don't belong to a tribe. They don't know even who their father, what background tribe he belongs to.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. We're discussing the aftermath of the attack on a Nairobi mall by Al-Shabaab, the militant group affiliated to al-Qaeda. I'm joined by Valentina Soria, a terrorism expert at IHS Janes Consulting, Mary Harper, author of the book Getting Somalia Wrong, and Mohamed Elmi, chairman of Somali Diaspora UK. So, Mary, there's a kind of unifying thread for Al-Shabaab in terms of it's a badge of identity in as much for their country, for Somalia.
I think it goes beyond Somalia, but if you look at Al-Shabaab, is very effective in terms of its international propaganda, and it releases these very slick videos with even this American member of Al-Shabaab who you mentioned, Hamami, who was killed recently. He sings rap in English in some of the videos, so they can attract followers, not only members of the Somali diaspora, but other young, impressionable, perhaps marginalised people, or people who, it's almost like a form of rebellion against authority, against the West, and they've done that very effectively. I mean, there are certain lessons that can be learned from the parts of Somalia where Al-Shabaab governed, because they managed to establish pretty repressive forms of local authority, but they did do away with some of these clan differences and other things that have bedeviled Somalia for decades. And so even though Al-Shabaab is a violent movement that uses the most unpleasant repressive tactics, some of the ways in which it governs Somalia, they have got a lot to teach, maybe even the new Somali government in Mogadishu, about how to govern a country that is its primary sort of dividing factor is clan.
Mohammed, I mean, in terms of this slick operation that they have in terms of propaganda and attracting people to their movement from the West, do you think that that's against they can join a movement that's against Western civilization as much as anything? But what do we make of a white middle class Brit effectively being radicalized and ending up in that part of the world?
Al-Shabaab really, to be honest, the way we see is that is an organization that, as we said, losing on the ground. And a lot of people, even Somali community here, think that as even ourselves, our President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has mentioned in his last speech that Al-Shabaab has lost on the ground completely in Somalia. But this now, Al-Shabaab will give huge tensions from world media. And I think this will give a huge impact for their, this is giving a bit of life. So, a lot of community, a lot of, those even not Somalis, but those even believe in their ideology, which link to al-Qaeda and maybe or Taliban or whatever. So I think now they send a signal to the international community that is an organization can do anything they want, any place, anywhere in the world. So I think that message now is something that worried. That's why the whole media now focusing regards the incident happen. And the question now, even ourselves, we're asking is, we know that now CIA and MI5 and MI6, they're involving in the incident as far as we're concerned, and they find identifying the blood, those who are behind. So they're doing a DNA test. So we're not sure yet. Even though a lot of people who already been seized and interviewed by Kenyan police authority, they saying that during even the shootings happening, the language we are hearing and those organization communities, they were talking themselves, is not a Somali language. It's not pure Somali language, because if it's Somali language, two Somalian people, they can talk Somali each other. But I think they talk into different language. They talk in Swahili, they talk in Arabic, they talk in... So that's why even the authority itself and those who are examining the situations, they are confused to identify who really belongs to this, despite Al-Shabaab claim itself. So now, Al-Shabaab, now they are upper hand side. As I said, now I think it depends on whether that another organization maybe will found. I think we have to leave now until we cannot predict, until the local authority, they come up with some sort of strong statement regards to who really behind it.
And I'm just wondering, Valentina, it happened a while ago, but computer memory sticks were recovered from an Al-Shabaab operative killed in Somalia, revealing plans to attack targets in Britain. And I suppose what people in Britain want to know is, could this happen here? Whitehall officials did actually point out particularly that those plans that I've referred to were only an aspiration and that there'd never been any kind of workable plot here. But I'm just wondering what you think of that and the fears of whether this could happen here.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty much, at the moment, it remains an aspiration. When that memory stick was found, was Fazul Mohamed was actually, one possibly al-Qaeda representative in East Africa. So there's not necessarily, a direct connection to al-Shabaab in terms of, that kind of, plot or planning going on within the organization, which, traces back to the UK or Europe. Plans to carry out similar attacks were, disrupted in 2010. So there were plans to actually target soft targets across Europe, and UK was one of the countries, of course, possibly targeted. It remains a possibility. An attack like this is always possible, but I think that at the same time, it takes a certain level of, preparation and sophistication. So in terms of the actual technicalities behind an attack like this, there would have to be proper planning going on, and I think it's become easier for authorities in the UK to actually track down and identify cells which are up to this kind of plots, whereas it would be more difficult, of course, as we've seen even with the Woolwich incident in May, to track and identify and disrupt in time lone wolf attacks. That is becoming more of a concern for authorities in the UK, and it's probably the way that, qualitatively speaking, the terrorist threat is been evolving in the past few years.
And Mohamed, are you concerned that Somalis could be unfairly targeted in the UK by security services here?
The community shows huge sympathy to the current government. The community are aware that the personal initiative, Mr. Cameron, and the two big conference held calling 55 nations, include UN and America and Britain and France and all over the world, to finding permanent solution to the country, how the Somali can stand their own feet. I think so that the Somali community living here, they very much welcome the hard lobbying that they play in the current government, especially Mr. Cameron, his personal initiative. I think that the community has touched their heart. I don't think so that any youth or any radicalized Somali community are taken in London street and government, they should worry that the community, they ensure yesterday meetings we had that I don't think so that Somali, because at the end of the day, it's give and take. I think what UK government are giving to the Somali government and Somali people, and I think it's something that the community can see, something that the community already realize, and something that the community already touched their heart. And I don't think so that they do anything stupid in London Street or Glasgow or Manchester. The community, they are fully support the current coalition government, and I think that's something that we are advising them, despite that community have given their heart. But I think something stupid can happen any minute, any time. So they should liaise the community with itself. And what we're requesting them is that this meeting should be always not something what happen always, anything, but it should a meeting that should be maintained and always have regular meetings about the movement and what's going on. And I think the community, they must make sure that they demonstrate that the community, they are wanted, the Somali community should be clean, should not be involved anything to do with here. But I think in regards to the community, we're not expecting that the UK government or authority or MI5 to be target the community, and I don't think so that they know that what the community show them is absolutely something that themselves they believe. And I think is a record what Cameron has done to our country, and now he is playing forefront, international community leading, and I think it become the first Western countries to establish embassy, diplomatic embassy in Mogadishu.
And on that point, Mary Harper, I mean, you know Somalia well, you've written about it extensively. I mean, in terms of having an international response, I suppose the international community has tried to help Somalia. It's considered a failed state by many. How much of that political vacuum is going to play into the hands of al-Shabaab? Presumably al-Shabaab will be galvanized by this attack in Nairobi. What can the international community do?
Yes, I can imagine that al-Shabaab or sympathisers towards al-Shabaab might be inspired by what happened in Kenya, and they might think of maybe conducting some kind of lone wolf attack in another country as well. The international community, in which Britain has played a big role, has invested the most enormous amount of money, time, personnel and energy over the past couple of years in trying to bring about what they describe as a more legitimate government in Somalia. But I do think that the whole narrative on that government and on Somalia turning a corner is rather over-optimistic and quite politicised, because the new government in Somalia, okay, it was formed on Somali soil to some extent with quite a heavy hand of international players in it. It really cannot even exist in Mogadishu without the support of foreign military forces. And it's been in power for a year now, and quite a few Somalis are beginning to lose not faith in the government, but they're somewhat disillusioned with it. So unless the new Somali government and the foreign powers that back it can really bring about some kind of radical change in terms of security, al-Shabaab might well be back, not just outside Somalia, but within the country itself.
We've sadly run out of time. That's Mary Harper, author of the book Getting Somalia Wrong, Faith, War and Hope in a Shattered State. Also here in the studio, Mohamed Elmi, who's chairman of Somali Diaspora UK. On the line, Valentina Soria, who is a security analyst at IHS Janes Consulting. Thank you all very much for joining me, Brendan Cole, on The Voice of Russia in London.